I am Patrick Yoes, National President of Fraternal Order Police. This is the Blue View. Well, Greg, thanks for joining us again on the Blue View podcast. It's always good to have you here in the studio and talking about the challenges that exist in our nation's capital. I appreciate all the work that you do as a leader of the Metropolitan Police Department and protecting the rights of your members. And I know you've got a serious challenge in your hand. For our viewers and listeners, tell them a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Pat. It's my pleasure. My name is Gregg Pemberton. I'm the chairman of the DC Police Union. It's an FOP organization that represents about 3,000 police officers that work for the Metropolitan Police Department here in the nation's capital. And so right now we're pretty well focused on making sure that we protect their rights and that we're developing the organization, and that also we're looking to fight this explosion of crime that we've been dealing with here in the city.
You know, Greg, last year we had a significant fight. City Council passed a number of measures. One of them, a crime act, a comprehensive crime act that really kind of tied the hands of law enforcement and their ability to be able to combat crime in the city. And then the other one was attacking your rights, collective bargaining rights as an organization. I know that we were successful in part of this in Congress. Congress overrode, and the president did not veto. So, you know, part of this was fixed. The other part kind of left it in limbo, and we predicted that this was going to be detrimental to the city of Washington. So here we are, just a few short months later, probably 6 months later. What does crime look like in a city as compared to prior to this Comprehensive Crime Act?
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Pat. You know, as you mentioned, we had this Comprehensive Policing and Justice Reform Act that was passed by the City Council here in D.C. It was absolutely detrimental to the rights of police officers and their ability to actually do the jobs that we want them to do, keeping this crime down. And we did. We successfully got it through the House and the Senate with bipartisan support. Unfortunately, when it went down the street to Pennsylvania Avenue, the president didn't see it the same way, and he vetoed the resolution to eliminate that bill. So now we're stuck with it, and we're living with this bill. And as you said, crime has continued to increase. So we ended 2023 with almost 1,000 carjackings, which was 110% up from where it was the year prior. We had 274 homicides, which was a 40% increase over the prior year, which was also a significant record. This was the highest number of homicides we've had since 1997, so a 2.5-decade record. Robberies were up 60%, violent crime overall was up 40%, and property crimes were up almost 30%. And we haven't seen that abated at all now that we're moving into the 2024 numbers. So, you know, our message here is that the City Council really needs to go back and look at the provisions that they've enacted over the past 3 or 4 years and the detrimental effect they've had to public safety and policing more specifically.
So exactly what did these reforms, so-called reforms, what did they do that has hampered the ability for police in the city?
Yeah, that's another great question, and this is something it's sort of difficult to express because this is a sweeping 84-page bill with 26 subtitles in it. But it eliminated the collective bargaining rights of police officers. It eliminated their disciplinary appeal rights. It eliminated their access to arbitration. It ended the due process that they had in terms of the timeliness of disciplinary matters. It created a new penalty for neck restraints, which chokeholds and neck restraints have been banned in the city since the 80s. It added language that said incidental contact with the subject's neck is also an unjustified use of force. It changed the way that we're able to stop people, to pursue people, even on foot. There are aspects of the bill that are completely prohibitive for police officers to actually get out and do their job and engage, you know, suspects of crime. So it has done exactly what you and I predicted it would do last time we were on the show, which is prevented the ability for officers to do their job and allowed criminals to be emboldened. So again, you know, what we're hoping to see here is that the City Council starts to take a much more level-headed review of these measures and try to get them fixed.
So let me break this into two categories. One, you talked about the union rights and the protections that working Americans have. Every working American has, you know, across this country, and how they have hampered and taken away that right to law enforcement officers in the city. Let me be a little more specific. Of all the different classes of employees that are unionized in our nation's capital, does any of these provisions take away any of the union rights that exist for every other city employee in a city, or is it just singling out police officers?
Yeah, this bill singled out police officers. As a matter of fact, the language in the bill singles out the police officers that belong to my union. You know, as you know, the FOP has something like 30 or 40 different police agencies that operate here in the District of Columbia. Well, every single aspect of this bill was directed not only at our police officers, but at police officers that belong to our union, and it actually names the members by the union that they belong to. And you know, eliminating their right to look at their own body-worn camera footage. It releases their names and their body-worn camera footage almost immediately after any serious use of force. You know, I could go on, but the bill, what it's done is over the past 3 years or so that this bill has actually been in effect on a temporary basis. We've lost over 1,400 police officers, and we've only been able to replace about 900, which is leaving us with a gap of about 500 police officers right now, which is completely catastrophic.
So on a criminal prosecution side of this, the policing side of this, I mean, obviously we're seeing a rise in crime. We're seeing a number of things that trajectory that shows that this is doing a complete opposite than what was hoped for. What can be done? I mean, we're here. It's done. It's done. The president didn't veto it, so we're dealing with the outcome of those actions. Things that, as you said, we predicted. What can be done to fix this? I mean, at what point do we recognize that, look, we're all invested in this. We all want a safe city, and police officers as well. I'm just curious, when they put this large crime bill together, how much interaction did they ask the police union? How much involvement were you part of this in saying, hey, here's the correct way? The ones that no one knows the city better, at least in policing, are the ones that are walking the street every day. How much input did they ask us to be part of?
Yeah, another frustrating aspect of this. So Councilmember Brooke Pinto, who now heads up the Judiciary Committee, committee that oversees public safety, I met with her and her staff multiple times, and we were absolutely clear on what needs to be done to get some of these issues resolved, which is really to go back and repeal these measures that you and I have been speaking about on this podcast and others. And it did not seem like there was much of an appetite to do so. I think one thing that's frustrating is the bill that you've been talking about, the Secure DC Act, is an omnibus bill. It actually combines about a dozen separate pieces of legislation that have been introduced by the council over the past 6 months or so that are designed to impact crime. One of them was introduced by the mayor. It was called the Addressing Crime Trends Now Act. And, I have to commend the mayor because several of the provisions in her bill did exactly that. It repealed 4 or 5 of these measures that I've just been talking about from this Comprehensive Policing and Justice Reform Act. And we applauded the mayor for that. I think she recognizes what police officers need to do their job. She recognizes what citizens are asking for in holding criminals accountable and allowing police officers to do their job. So she introduced a bill that I think would have actually moved the needle here. Unfortunately, when that aspect of the bill got into the Judiciary Committee, every single one of those measures was either eliminated or watered down to the extent that it was completely ineffective.
And to the detriment of the people in the city.
Absolutely. I
mean, the numbers don't lie. It's easy, I say this often, we talk about it all the time. We talk about numbers, they're impersonal. So we throw numbers around like they're nothing. Well, those numbers are real people. Mm-hmm. They're real people, they're real lives, they're real families. And at some point, somebody has to recognize that we're doing some serious damage here, causing people their lives, and the very things that we claim to be somehow protecting, we're actually having an adverse impact. At what point do we recognize that? Look across this country, and you'll see a number of cities that have done the same exact thing that you identify here in D.C. You also see a lot of those cities now going back and saying, okay, maybe that was a bridge too far. Maybe we need to do a little more reform. And they're starting to peel back some of these things. Not to say that everything that they're proposing is not good. We certainly, even, some of the crime bills, there were things that we really liked and felt like we could be a part of. But in reality, there were things that we absolutely couldn't, and they didn't want our input on any of that. At what point does a city simply say, crime is out of control? I mean, there's some empirical data to show that it's a less safe place than it was prior to this. At what point do we look at it and say, okay, there needs to be a course adjustment here? Maybe not turn around, but a course adjustment to recognize some of these pitfalls. Tell me what do we need to do?
Well, that's what we keep waiting for. You know, we've seen these numbers climb and climb and climb, and every time I feel like, well, you know, now this has to be a breaking point. Yeah. We're going to have to see people come back towards the center on some of these issues, and unfortunately, there's a number of members of our city council here that just keep climbing over each other to get further and further left on these anti-police issues, and you know, until the voters realize that and hold them accountable through the election process, then I don't see this fixing itself here in the district. One thing that I'll say that we've seen over the past month or so that I think is positive is there's a group of people in the Ward 6, which is the Capitol Hill area in the District of Columbia, that have formed a committee to recall one of the council members, a guy named Charles Allen. Councilmember Allen was the champion of police reform, and he was the one that ushered this bill into the council and added some of the most offensive and most ridiculous reforms you could possibly imagine. And now that those things have gone into effect, and as you said, we've seen the empirical data of that over the past few years, we know the results of it, those members of his constituency are moving to recall him. And it's a heavy lift. It's a tough process. I don't know that it's ever been done before, but there seems to be a pretty big groundswell and a grassroots effort to get this gentleman recalled. And I think if they're successful here, I think that that's a shot across the bow for the city council about being more reasonable. I'm
curious where his constituency, where he represents that part of the city. What's the changes in crime since the implementation of this?
Yeah, that's a good point, because he represents Ward 6, and Ward 6 saw the highest increase in carjackings over the past year. It also saw an incredible increase in murders. It went from something like 6 to 26 just over the course of 1 year. The robberies, the armed robberies, the street robberies are completely off the charts. And I think the people of Capitol Hill are absolutely frustrated. I'm sure you saw the news that there was a Congressman Cuellar was carjacked here in this district, and Angie Craig, another council member, was assaulted in her own apartment building. And the number of staffers and interns that work up on the Hill is just innumerable. And I think what we're seeing now is citizens and workers and people who come in and out of the city, they're fed up. And they're starting to let people know.
It's what a sad statement, you know, America, United States, just the power of this country itself, and what it stands for. Our nation's capital is under siege. I mean, I don't think that's an understatement.
Yeah, unfortunately not. It sounds hyperbolic, but you look at these numbers and you realize that just a little over 10 years ago in 2012, we only had 88 homicides in the entire city. Last year we had 274. Yeah. I mean, that's something like a 300% increase just over that 10-year period. And I think you're right that while this is a municipal government here that runs the District of Columbia, this is the seat of the federal government, and this is a symbol of what America is, and people come from all over the world to see it, and to have our city under attack, under siege, as you said, it really is depressing. And I'm hoping that over the course of the next year or so that we're going to see some of these citizens come out and start holding council members accountable for what they're dealing with every day.
I got to tell you, I say this often, and I know you'll agree with it. Anyone in law enforcement, anyone who spent more than a minute in law enforcement knows one simple fact: there's a small segment of population in every community, every city, who commits the large percentage of most violent crime. And when we're able to take these people off the streets, what we have is safer communities. So somehow along the way, we now believe that not taking people off the streets that prey on others is somehow going to make a community safer. I mean, I'd say, would you agree with my statement that the majority of the crime was probably committed by a small percentage of people?
Oh, absolutely. And those are the folks that need to be held most accountable. And I think what we see in our criminal justice system, you got officers that go out, they're arresting these people. You got detectives that are typing the warrants. We're getting handcuffs on them. We're getting into the criminal justice system. We're getting them convicted of violent, heinous crimes. And then the judges are just letting them off the hook. And, they're saying time served or 6 months probation. And they're right back on the street committing the same type of crimes they were when they just caught.
And until we recognize that, we're not going to fix this problem. I I mean, the quality of life in a community, any community. We're talking about Washington, D.C. here, but it really doesn't matter. Pick any state, any community. Really, the quality of life in those communities is all aspects of government working together towards a common goal of creating a safe community. In this particular case, you've got a few spokes of that wheel that have been cut off. They've been completely cut off, and imagine that they don't exist, and what we're seeing is the end result of it. When we all work together towards a common goal, well, there's nothing we can't fix. But in this case, they really don't want to hear what law enforcement's perspective is on it. It's because they're, for whatever reason, struggles we have. Congress, in Congress, New York Congressman Garabino has introduced a bill protecting our, the city. It's emergency, Capital City Emergency Act. Can you talk a little bit about it, about what it does, and what's your view on that bill?
Yeah, Congressman Garbarino brought this bill. I think it's right now. It's in the House Oversight Committee. It is H.R. 5798. It is the Protecting the Nation's Capital Emergency Act. And what Congressman Garbarino has seen is that he understands that stripping all of these protections and rights away from police officers is really inhibiting the staffing. It's causing a completely outrageous attrition rate. Officers are leaving at an alarming rate, and the number of people that we're bringing into the department is not keeping up with that pace. So we have a net loss of officers every year. And he understands, I think, that the city council is not moving with the urgency it needs to fix this problem. So he's introduced a bill, again, in Congress to fix the mistakes that the city council has made. And what this is going to do, it's going to replace the collective bargaining rights of police officers, their collective bargaining rights over the disciplinary system. It's going to replace the due process rights they have when they have these frivolous complaints made against them. And it's going to allow them to protect themselves so that when they go out and do their job responsibly, constitutionally, professionally, the way we all want them to do their job, and some complaint or some misconduct allegation comes in, that they'll be able to respond to those properly and be cleared of those charges, because the system right now basically assumes that the accuser is right and the officer has to defend himself, and he's guilty until proved innocent. And that's a very hard place to come from, and I think a lot of officers get fed up and frustrated with that, and they go look for employment elsewhere. So we're really excited about Congressman Garbarino's bill. I think, I hope that it will come out of the Oversight Committee with a vote and get to the floor. And we're working on some Senate support with a companion bill, and if so, we'll take another run at the White House, and hopefully they'll sign this one.
Yep. Well, everything's all timing, right? It's you got an election year, and crime is something that is a key factor. So maybe this time, maybe we can try and get it right, and everyone start working together. So best we can hope for at this particular point. So we've got viewers and listeners that are from all over the country. How can they help you?
This is my favorite question, is because we have received an outpouring of support from the other FOPs all over the country in prior issues. As you mentioned, the Revised Criminal Code Act, which was a bill we successfully defeated, the Policing and Justice Reform Act, which, while, again, we successfully got through Congress, it was vetoed by the president. But we would not have been able to do that without the help of the other lodges and state lodges all over the country. So the message here is that wherever you are in this country, wherever your lodge operates, you have a congressman and a senator that you can reach out to. And what I would tell them is that they need to take a look at H.R. 5798, the Protecting the Nation's Capital Emergency Act, and you need to tell them to support that bill, because that bill is going to reinstitute the collective bargaining rights and the due process rights of police officers here in the District of Columbia. It's going to eliminate the attrition problems we have. It's going to expand the candidate pool. It's going to allow us to properly staff this department, which will in turn allow us to get some of these bad guys off the street and try to get these crime numbers down.
We talked about the crime. We talked about all those parts. We talked about taking away the union rights, and talked briefly about how it's affecting that attrition rate, the recruiting and retention. We have an existential crisis across this country, trying to attract the next wave of the best and brightest. And all this damage that has been done to demonization of law enforcement has had its impact. And then you add to that, taking away certain protections, employment protections, and in addition to that, the frustration of a system that's broken and really doesn't care to get out of its own way. How is that affecting? Now, you mentioned that you 900 recruits. I'm impressed if you get that many people came through an academy. I'm just curious. even with that, it's still leaving a pretty big draft. Of your people who are leaving, are they leaving a profession? Are they leaving to go to other agencies? What are you seeing?
I would say you see about half and half. Half of the folks that are resigning, just turning in their badge and gun and walking away, they're finding employment elsewhere. I mean, right now, as you know more than anybody else, all over the country, agencies are having a recruiting crisis. You could throw a dart at a map of the United States, and wherever that dart lands, there's probably 3 or 4 agencies that would love to have you, especially if you have 3, 4, 5 years experience working here in the nation's capital. And our men and women recognize that, and they say, well, if we're not going to be treated with the respect that we deserve going out here, putting our lives on the line to protect the city, then we'll go somewhere that will. And so we see about half of the people leaving sort of have that attitude. They go look for law enforcement that doesn't have these onerous provisions or doesn't have this, this radical city council oversight. The other group, which I would say is about another half, is people that just say, this isn't worth it. I don't need to be involved in law enforcement. This is a blue-collar government job, and I can go find similar pay somewhere else, and I don't have to put on a ballistic vest and a 9mm every day and go out on the street and also get treated like garbage. Yeah. And we see people getting into other industries. And so I think, one of the things that city councils all over the country have to take a look at, and you mentioned that some of them already are, and that's why I think they're seeing improving numbers, is that we have to treat our employees with respect, especially ones that are going to go out and do this job that is everyone knows is so difficult to do. We can't treat them all like they're going out to engage in misconduct and do something wrong. Yeah. If people aren't going to do their job properly, they should be held accountable.
Absolutely.
Of course, and you and I have talked about that multiple times. And obviously, if you're going to disgrace your badge, then, you need to be held accountable for that. But the vast majority of these officers are going out doing exactly what we want them to do, which is constitutional, responsible policing. And we cannot pass laws that treat them like garbage and then expect them to keep coming to work every day.
Now, Greg, I'm going to wrap it up for you. I'm going to put this in a nice, clean package. We're all recruited. Every one of us got into law enforcement. We got recruited, went through a whole series of testing and everything. We went through academies, and we were taught policies and procedures in criminal law and rules of evidence, and all of these factors that are necessary for us to go out in a community and do a job. We're taught how to do these things. We're given policies that we are to follow. We go out and we do the very job that we're asked to do, and when we do that job and follow those policies and procedures, we ourselves are now being attacked because we did exactly what we were hired and taught and trained in following policy and procedure to do. If you really want to fix this problem, and make law enforcement officers across this country feel like they're valued, then simply stand by them when they do exactly what you hired them to do and you trained them to do and you told them to go out and do. And when they do it, there's an expectation that they should be supported in doing it. That doesn't exist in D.C., does it?
It does not, no. I would say that, we've over the past few years, we've gotten a lot of support from the mayor. She's somebody that even at the very beginning of this suggested that we're not going to defund the police. We're not going to get rid of our police officers, that we need to have proper staffing and proper training in all these communities to keep them safe. And she's been a real advocate for us. Outside of that, the 13 members of our city council have taken the exact opposite approach, which is to try to defund and demonize and try to run police officers out of town. And any time there's any discussion about what we should do for police officers, there's always some law or policy they want to make to punish them. And until we get away from those ideas and that ideology that police officers are inherently terrible, I don't think these numbers are going to change, but I'm optimistic that it seems to be a groundswell of citizens out here who are saying we're fed up, we're not going to put up with this crime anymore, and officers need to be able to do their job, and bad guys need to get put in jail. And I'm sorry that it took so much to get here, but I'm hopeful that messaging is going to find its way into the council one way or another, and we're going to see some more realistic, common sense, logical policies coming out of that body.
Well, a battle worth fighting. Because lives depend on it. So appreciate all that you do. Just a thankless job of representing a group of people that the city really owes so much to, and that and do not get the credit they deserve. Any final thoughts you'd like to have as we wrap this up that you'd like to share?
Yeah, Pat. I mean, I can't say enough how much help that other FOP members have had. I know we've been at the conferences and. A lot of these national FOP meetings, and there is just, a huge number of FOPs that have come up to us. They're aware of the problems that we have here, that they're knowledgeable about it. They ask what they can do. We provide them information, and they have been just remarkable at sort of circling the wagons around us to get us the support we need. And so, I would just like to say thank you on behalf of the 3,000 officers that I represent here in D.C. Thank you to all those other FOPs all over the country for all the work that you guys have put in trying to help us. It's been remarkable, and I'm very impressed.
Well, this is a journey we all take together, so I appreciate your hard work. If somebody wants to know more about the D.C. Metropolitan Police Union, what's the best way for them to go about that?
Our website is dcpoliceunion.com. And you can go there to find a lot more information about us. If you want to know more specifically about some of the issues we talked about today, we have a separate website, enoughisenoughdc.com, and that really just talks about some of the policies that the City Council has been implementing and how you can help us fight back against them. Those are the two best ways to get in touch with us.
And to our viewers and listeners, thank you for tuning in to the Blue View Podcast, where we talk about the issues that are so vitally important to the men and women who suit up and show up every single day in communities across this country and make a difference in the lives of those we serve. Thank you.
Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you get your podcasts. To get the latest from the National FOP, make sure to follow us on Twitter and Facebook at GLFOP and on Instagram at FOP National. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.